Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Cone Dodger here. Welcome back to Automation. Today, we're going to have a little bit of a send-off for our Lite campaign playthrough, as well as a little bit of a send-off for the key engine build of Automation. We'll start out with looking at some of the highlights of our Automation Lite campaign playthrough. This was the Vanity company and the Vanity sub-company that produced vehicles from 1946 until the year 2020, our last vehicle going on to production in 2014. So today we're just going to look at and go over what some of the highlights or possible lowlights of the series were, and kind of just send it off and say goodbye to Vanity. No, Vanity. Vanity may continue on, but Vanity will be done. Why I picked those names, I don't even remember anymore, but they're very confusing. Unfortunately, the way the key engine version of Automation works, there's no way to sort these out by column, which I thought I was going to be able to. But what I've done is gone and inputted all of these cars rather hastily into a spreadsheet so that we could take a look and see what our top performers were as far as profit, total profit score, and total cars sold go. And we'll take a look at those. And let's see if I can hop over to that. Please work, please work, please work. Yeah. Here we go. And the list of 24 vehicles here, that seems short, doesn't it? That seems like a lot less vehicles than it felt like we built in that time, but I certainly didn't go through this absolutely maxing out the amount of cars we could produce over time. Instead, I produced things that were on theme and felt fun to make. So, in the end, we may not have made as absolute much money as we could have, but I feel real proud and had a lot of fun making the cars that we made. Alright, so the most obvious question is, which vehicle made the most money? And most likely it's one of the truffles, but we'll see. So I'm going to select all of these. Actually, I don't think I can do that, but I'm going to sort by profit made. And, oh, I did that backwards. I want to do that Z to A. It is indeed the Truffle Mark III, our top profiting vehicle at $18.73 billion. Here it is, the Truffle 1991's finest cargo and people-moving vans. Probably not the most interesting... Oh, that's still stuff. I wanted people. Most interesting vehicle we made in the entire history of the series. However, I think it was one of the most important. The three generations of Truffle. I should remember this. How many Truffles were there? There was 3. Okay. The 3 generations of Truffle really did carry our company forward and let us do a lot of fun things. And although it's not exactly the kind of car that I lust after making, it actually was pretty enjoyable to design. And I think we ended up with a good product. And that's important. This thing, the Truffle Mark III, took us from 1991 until the end of the campaign. So that, I think, is a pretty amazing success. Anywhere along the line, probably by the early to mid 2000s, could have made another generation of Truffle, but this thing just kept making money, and it kept making buyers happy, so we kept with it. Now, believe it or not, money isn't everything. The top scoring vehicle. Now, this goes into the game's score based on the units sold, based on, I believe, its reputation and prestige weighting. I actually honestly don't know exactly what all goes into the score rating, but it's more than just profit. And if we go for that statistic, it is actually the Bionic Mark II, which was one of our top profiting vehicles, that was the top scoring 7,625.29. Now this guy here, I designed this car for fun. I had just a ton of fun with its, overall theme, and it's a little almost bit fantasy, It's kind of in line more with the Aston Martin, exclusive sports car rather than your everyday kind of sports car, kind of Viper-esque. It was V12 powered. It had a 4.10 to 60 and a top speed of 214 miles an hour. Just an extremely high performance vehicle. And then it went out and it sold like crazy. Like, this was one of the best selling cars, and even towards the end of our company's history, still scored very well with a massive profit margin. We're talking well over 100%, at times towards 150% over the production cost of the vehicle. So that's what ended up making this thing such a huge, huge success for our company. And I'm happy for that, because it was one of my favorite designs of the entire series. And it did well. Also, one more category to look at, the best selling. Who moved the most units? Now, it's probably going to be one of those two, I would guess. But we'll take a look at it. And it's actually not. It's the Magnet Mark III, moving 4.4 million units. A lot of those things ended up all over the world. The Magnet Mark III, which also had a profit of 10 billion and a score of 2,102. Not a huge scoring vehicle, but a good money-making vehicle, and obviously it helped with our overall presence in the automotive world with that many units sold for our relatively small company. And here it is, the Magnet Mark III, a very good car. I enjoyed making this one as well. We had just an eco version of this one. There was no super fun stuff, but it was a very good challenge on making this kind of city commuter car. And this is the one we ended up getting the most right. It ended up having some issues later on due to its safety regulations, which made it unsellable in some of the markets. And when that happened, it did kind of stunt what could have been a much higher selling vehicle, and the Magnet Mark IV didn't quite come online soon enough, I believe, to surpass this one, although it may have in time. But overall, the Magnet was a good car for us. You can't look at the best without looking at the worst. The worst selling vehicle for us, I believe, was our first one. No doubts about it. And the Vauxhall, although, it was the stepping stone. It was getting our company started. It only made us 14 million. No, 1.4 million. It only scored us 62 points, and it only sold less than 100,000 units. It was the foundation of our company, and it got us started. So there you have it. There was the best cars of our company's history. Personally, I think my favorite did indeed end up being the second generation Bionic. I really, really did enjoy just the overall design process of that one. I like that theme. It's something that the American market's never really done. A big displacement V12, but it's also very much so in line with the whole Viper kind of philosophy as well. That's obviously something that I've always really, really liked. So yeah, that was my personal favorite. But it sure was nice having all of the cars throughout our history named after viewers, and it was always entertaining to see people rally around what was in essence their car. And I'm happy with how this whole Lite campaign went. It was, like I said in the last video, a lot more fun than my first attempt at a Lite campaign, and I'm glad that everybody enjoyed it. There was cars along the way that I really did enjoy making that didn't necessarily do as well as others, like the Spud. The Spud was a very fun car to make, but I think it was also a learning car for us. I didn't even give it a trim name. How rude of me. But yeah, it didn't end up being a super successful car, but I don't think we had any real flops in our history. Everything had a positive score, and everything in the end made a profit. So, no flops, just some that were stronger or weaker than others. So that's it for Fantasy's Vanity Company. Now I would like to go back and look at a trip down memory lane of automation, because we're at kind of an interesting crossroads right here. This is the end of the key engine build of automation. This has taken us from 2011 to where we are now, and it has grown a lot along the way. It has evolved a lot over time, and although it is time to move on, it's time to move forward, I very much so appreciate everything that we got out of this engine and this build of the game, and all the builds of the game over the years. So let's take a little trip down memory lane. Now, I first found out about automation way back in 2011, and I found out about it from an article on Autoblog. I don't know if it was this article or not. However, it was certainly on Autoblog, I'm pretty sure, and it was definitely in 2011 because I looked at my purchase history, and it was way back in September of 2011. So that's 6 years ago. And it's certainly past all my expectations as to what it has become. But yeah, I want to kind of go back and look at some of the older stuff. Now, I started playing September 2011. What I have been given is the earliest known version of something pertaining to automation. This was sent to me by Keswal, who dug this up and got it working. It is the automation pre-alpha. This is actually pre-key engine. And when I say key engine, the game up until this point was built on an in-house built game engine known as Key. This is before that, and you can tell it's very limited in what you can do and see. But what you see here is basically the initial game that we all played and messed around with, just without the graphical representations. So you could build an engine in line 4 and in line 6. And remember when it used to be that you could choose between the different sizes of blocks? Well, that went back to here as well. So you could choose a large in line 4, you could change the bore, and you could change the stroke, and that would, you know, change the how much power it made. So currently it's making well, whatever these numbers are. They're probably in like kilowatts and newton meters and all that kind of stuff that I don't understand. But yeah, it was the very basics and early representation of what you had to deal with. So you would go through and choose your dual overhead cam or whatever. You would choose, you know, your materials. This is actually, I believe, the only time you would see the ability to change the cam duration and cam lift. This was later not used because it was considered to be just, you know, too technically kind of confusing to understand in detail that wasn't needed. You have to choose a carburetor, of course. No injection was in this one, I do suppose. But yet, you could do... I didn't even realize that. You could do turbochargers with a small intercooler. Interesting. Exhaust was nothing, apparently. And that was kind of it. You know, this is it's very neat to see, but there's not a lot to see here. But it's very cool to see the very humble beginnings of automation. Now we move to July of 2012, and this is the first publicly released version of automation. So at this point I had read some articles about it on Autoblog, and was messing around with the pre-release stuff, but this was the big introduction to the game to the public, and it did get quite a bit of publicity. However, it wasn't until March of 2013 that I actually did some videos in it. But this version of the game that you see here, very similar to what we would have seen then. And it's certainly a very different game than what you see today. This is simply an engine designer, that is all there was to it. And, you know, I really enjoyed it, like I said, just as a neat toy. It was so cool to get to design engines and, you know, see really how everything worked. It was just very cool, and I spent many hours just even in this mode. I can even remember me and my brother, before there was any beta multiplayer or anything like that, we would just set each other like time limits on building an engine and see who could do the coolest engine in a certain amount of time. So from very early days, I definitely saw a lot of potential in this game. So here you go. This is the version that we actually started on YouTube back in March of 2013. Now, I only wish that I had known then what I know now, in that I was basically one of the first people to do videos in animation, and they would actually kind of gain a pretty significant following, because I did not make those videos really with the intent of anybody watching them. I was very, very new to doing commentary, and they're not very good. But the idea I came up with to use automation as a platform, since it wasn't a game, you know, it was still just a tool. You just made engines at this point still, although it was getting more polished. But I wanted to use it as a tool to kind of go through the history of engine design that was available in the game, so inline 4s, inline 6s, and V8s, and V8 flat planes. And that's what I did. I went through and built notable engines, and the fun of that series was for me going through and doing a lot of research about those engines. So I personally found out a lot about engine design and such during that phase. Most importantly, in this update, exhaust, we need more of it. We got turbos. This thing's gonna blow up, isn't it? I just clicked right through that stuff. We got turbos. We didn't get turbo piping, though. There's a nice elbow. Ooh, it's doing bad things. But it did not blow up. A little harsh on the sounds. 2014 comes along, and we get a version of automation that looks pretty similar to the version of automation we were playing until today. This version of automation was, I believe, the Steam Greenlight version when it was first posted to Steam. My memory's a little fuzzy on that. But, most importantly, it was the first to have cars. And although the user interface has improved significantly since then, from the early times of these days, the fixtures really did bring a lot of life to the game, and really, I don't know, I guess when they started to add the actual car bodies and building entire cars, not just engines, for me, it switched over from neat toy to an actual game. And that's when we started doing our own little fantasy builds, we started doing our own fantasy series, and probably, I think what really embedded this as a long-going series for me in the channel. So yeah, this was a pretty important update. Another thing to note is that this version of the game had multiplayer, and if you were part of the game during that phase, the multiplayer really did show a lot of potential. It's since been brought down so they could be reworked for modern versions, but I really do think there's a good possibility the multiplayer portion of the game could be pretty fun in the future. Much like I said earlier, how me and my brother did our own little build-offs. It's a lot of fun just to sit down and come up with your own themes and challenge each other. And there's a lot to do about multiplayer coming to future versions, so I am told. So now off we go. We're done with the key engine, we're ready for the Unreal version. Over here in the Unreal version, as of today, there is back to only being a sandbox mode, but there is a new challenges mode. And this uses not just the scenarios and that kind of stuff that we've done in the past, but this will also now have a challenge creator that actually has AI that competes against you. So that's going to be an interesting new element to the game. So here you go, an engine scenario generator. There will be a car scenario generator as well. But this stuff really will kind of introduce a little bit of what I was talking about earlier with the multiplayer stuff, but in the single player portion. So we'll be checking that out in the future. And the new Lite campaign is in the works and will be released in not too very much time at all. So we'll be continuing on here on Automation in the new build. And just in case you needed a little bit more reason to get hyped about the Unreal version of the game, yeah, I think the Unreal build, it's coming along just fine. Alright, hope you enjoyed our trip down memory lane today. Hope you're excited for more automation in the future as we move to the new version. I will see you next time. Thank you all for your support of automation over the years and your support of myself doing goofy things inside of automation. That ain't gonna stop anytime soon.